6 years ago, my husband stood in our driveway in the middle of the night and told me to get out. I was 4 months pregnant. He looked straight at my stomach and said the words I will never forget for as long as I live. "That's not my child." He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He said it the way you'd read a grocery list, calm and certain, like he had rehearsed those exact words in his head for days. Then he turned around, walked back into the house we built together, and locked the door behind him. I stood there alone in the freezing February air, with snow falling on my shoulders, and nowhere in the world to go. I had no idea that night would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, even though at the time, it felt like my entire life had just ended on that doorstep. My name is Hannah Bennett, and before you decide what you think about how this story ends, you need to hear how it began. I grew up in a small town called Maple Ridge, Ohio, in a house that always smelled like instant coffee and unpaid bills. My mother raised me alone after my father left, when I was 6 years old, and she worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. We didn't have much, but she taught me one thing that stuck with me my entire life. Nobody is ever going to save you, so you better learn how to save yourself. I carried that lesson with me everywhere, especially in the years I spent quietly studying, late at night after everyone else in my house had gone to sleep, working toward a future nobody else believed I deserved. I met Travis Bennett when I was 22, working the morning shift at a diner just outside of town. He came from a different world than mine. His family owned Bennett Construction, a company that had built half the houses and most of the strip malls in our county. His mother, Linda, sat on the town planning board, and everyone in Maple Ridge knew the Bennett name, the way you know the name of the church on Main Street. When Travis started coming into that diner every single morning just to talk to me, I felt like the luckiest girl in Ohio. I didn't see what I should have seen back then. I didn't see that his family looked at me the way you look at a stray dog that wandered into a nice neighborhood. Something to be tolerated, but never truly accepted. We got married 18 months later, in a small ceremony his mother barely attended. I gave up my plan to finish my accounting certification because Travis needed help running the office at Bennett Construction. And I told myself it was temporary, just until things settled down. Things never settled down. Years passed. I answered phones. I managed invoices. I smiled at his family during Sunday dinners, while his sister Renee made small comments about my background, just sharp enough to leave a mark, but soft enough that I could never call her out without looking ungrateful. Travis started spending less time talking to me and more time defending his sister whenever I brought up how she treated me. I told myself that was just how families worked. I was wrong. When I finally got pregnant after 3 years of trying, I thought it would change everything. I thought a baby would finally make me feel like I belonged in that family, instead of just being tolerated by it. Instead, 2 weeks after I told Travis the news, Renee pulled him aside at the company office and told him she'd heard from a reliable source that I had been seen having dinner with one of the site foremen, a man named Mark, who I had spoken to maybe a dozen times in 3 years, always about scheduling deliveries. There was no dinner. There was no affair. There was nothing but a jealous woman who had spent years waiting for an excuse to get rid of me. And she finally found one ugly enough to work. Travis didn't ask me a single question before he made up his mind. He came home that night already certain, already finished with me in his head. I tried to explain. I begged him to call Mark, to check the schedule, to do anything other than just believe his sister's word over 6 years of marriage. He looked at me with a coldness I had never seen on his face before, and said the math didn't add up to him, that something felt off, and that he needed me out of the house before he said something he would regret. I told him I was carrying his child. That's when he said it. "That's not my child." Then he walked inside and locked the door, and I stood in our driveway with one bag of clothes I'd managed to grab and nowhere to go, because my mother had passed away 2 years earlier, and I had no other family left in the world. I spent that first night in my car, in the parking lot of a Walmart on the edge of town, wrapped in the one blanket I owned, listening to my own heartbeat, and trying not to think about what was growing inside me, or how cold it was getting outside. I spent the next 2 weeks moving between that parking lot and a church lot a mile away, washing up in gas station bathrooms before my old shift at the diner, terrified someone from town would recognize my car and start asking questions I had no answers for. The only person who showed me any real kindness during that time was a waitress named Carol, who had worked the diner counter for 20 years, and never once asked me why I looked the way I looked. She just kept refilling my coffee and slipping an extra biscuit onto my plate without saying a word about it. What Travis never knew, what nobody in that family ever bothered to ask about, was that for the last 2 years of our marriage, I had been waking up at 4 in the morning, before his alarm ever went off, sitting in our laundry room, with my laptop balanced on top of the dryer, slowly finishing the accounting certification I had given up when we got married. I never told him. Some quiet part of me knew even back then that I might need it someday. I just never imagined I would need it this soon, or this badly, or that the skills I was hiding in that laundry room would one day be the exact thing that brought his entire world crashing down in front of the whole town that had spent 6 years looking right through me. 3 months after that night in the Walmart parking lot, Carol the waitress introduced me to her niece, who managed an apartment complex on the cheaper side of town, and I finally had a roof over my head again. I finished my accounting certification online between diner shifts, sitting on a second-hand couch with my daughter's ultrasound photo taped above my laptop screen as the only motivation I needed. The day I passed my final exam, I cried in a parking lot for an entirely different reason than I had 3 months earlier. I took my mother's maiden name, Doyle, and started doing bookkeeping for small contractors around the county who couldn't afford a big accounting firm. Word spread quietly that Hannah Doyle could find money problems other accountants missed, and within 2 years, I had my own small firm, with 4 employees and a waiting list of clients. My daughter Lily was born healthy that summer, and the moment the doctor placed her in my arms, I stopped caring whether Travis Bennett ever found out the truth. I had a paternity test done quietly through my own attorney, not for him, but for her, so that one day if she ever asked, she would have proof of exactly who tried to throw her away before she was even born. The results came back exactly as I knew they would. She was his daughter completely. While I was building my life back from nothing, Bennett Construction was quietly falling apart. Renee had been handling the company books for 3 years, and what I would later learn during an audit was that she had been moving company funds into accounts tied to her own name, covering gambling debts nobody in the family knew about. By the time the bank started asking questions about a refinancing loan Travis desperately needed to keep the company alive, Bennett Construction was nearly $2 million short of where its books said it should be. The bank required an independent audit before approving anything, and through a chain of referrals nobody at that bank thought twice about, the audit landed on my desk. I recognized the company name the second the file came through, and for one long moment, I sat there deciding whether to hand it off to someone else. Then I thought about that driveway, and the snow, and the 2 words that sent me into a Walmart parking lot while pregnant. I kept the file. What I found wasn't complicated once I knew where to look. 3 years of missing funds, falsified invoices, and a sister who had been bleeding the company dry while blaming rising material costs for every shortfall. I documented everything the way I would for any client. Except this time, I personally attended the meeting where the bank presented its findings to Travis, his mother, and the company's remaining board members. 2 weeks before Bennett Construction was set to receive the county's Small Business of the Year award at the annual Chamber of Commerce dinner, an award Travis had been chasing for years. I watched Travis's face when I walked into that meeting room. He hadn't seen me in 3 years. He looked at my daughter's photo on the cover page of my report. The same eyes, the same chin, sitting right there in black and white, attached to a paternity result I had included for one reason only, so he would know exactly what he had thrown away that night, and exactly who had been quietly proving him wrong every day since. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply walked him through the numbers, laid out 3 years of his sister's theft, and watched a family that had spent 6 years looking down on me sit in silence, because none of them had a single question left to ask. Bennett Construction lost its loan, lost the award, and lost its name within the year. Renee faced fraud charges once the audit became part of the public record. Travis lost the business his family had spent 40 years building, and he lost it the same year he finally saw his daughter's face for the first time, 4 years old, holding my hand outside a courthouse, looking nothing like a mistake, and everything like the family he threw out into the snow. I didn't do any of it for revenge, even though I understand why it looks that way from the outside. I did it because somebody finally had to tell the truth in that family, and it turned out the truth was sitting in a column of numbers the whole time, waiting for someone who knew exactly how to read it. If anyone has ever told you that you were not enough, that you didn't belong, that you were something to be thrown away, remember my story. Sometimes the people who try hardest to get rid of you are the exact reason you finally find out how strong you really were all along.